Welcome to the SeizeYourBusiness.com podcast. My name is Kevin O'Flaherty from O'Flaherty Law, and I'm here with my guest, Troy Golden from Golden Group Real Estate. He's one of our first return guests, and his previous episode, which dealt with a systematic approach to sales, was one of the most popular we've had. In fact, the most popular we've had. So we asked him back to do a systematic approach to sales part 2, which is going to be our topic today. So we're going to go into a little bit more depth on his last podcast. So, you know, if you don't really care about building blocks, then go ahead and listen to this episode. Otherwise, you may want to check out the previous podcast we did. It was episode 6, I believe, and it was one of our best. So thanks for being here today with us, Troy.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
So for people who are just tuning into this episode for the first time, why don't you tell everybody what you do and kind of a little bit of background?
I'm a commercial real estate broker. Specialize in tenant representation for office users in the western suburbs of Chicago. Basically, what that means is I help businesses find office space and then negotiate the lease or purchase contract. So my clients tend to be business owners, and that's kind of the perspective I'm coming from when I'll be talking about my prospecting system for the rest of this presentation, how I try to approach business owners or C-suite level executives, how I build those relationships. My sales cycle is very long-term because usually a lease doesn't come up for 3 to 7 years, sometimes 10 years. And it's a very large contract that they're signing. It's a big expense item. And coming from that perspective, it takes a certain approach. It's relationship sales. And I've developed what I call a systematic sales approach for relationship sales. And I'd like to talk a little bit about what I do. It's very applicable to people who are brokers, but also applicable to anyone who's prospecting in relationship sales in general or looking to develop relationships with decision makers.
And you never talk about this without being prodded to talk about it because you're a very humble guy, but talk about your background a little bit because it's really interesting.
Oh, sure. Well, I grew up in the South in North Carolina. Went to Yale for undergrad. Then after graduating, worked on political campaigns for a number of years, which is actually relevant because that background is kind of how I developed the approach that I'll be talking about here today. And I'll go into that in more detail later, but when I first developed this approach, I used a lot of the techniques I learned on the campaign trail to meet and develop relationships with business owners. It seems counterintuitive at first, but being a campaign manager is a lot like being a sales or selling to decision makers. There really are a lot of the same. You employ a lot of the same strategies, and I'll go over that later on in the presentation or in our discussion. And after working on the political campaigns for a number of years, eventually managing a state house race in my home state, North Carolina, I kind of aged out of the system and decided to go into commercial real estate. My last candidate, he was a real estate developer and went to University of Wisconsin where I got my MBA and moved here about 5 years ago where I met you. You were my first client.
Yeah, and you did a great job for him. Still in that lease.
Yeah, got you into this space, and kind of developed the system that we'll go over today really using a lot of my previous experience as a political campaign manager. Uh, I didn't have a lot of ties to the area, so I had to build up uh, I guess, my knowledge of the market and potential prospects from the ground up. And it was an interesting experience, but it's worked out really well for me. It's a great market here, and I've had a wonderful time doing it.
Well, and you have a PowerPoint that kind of ties into this presentation and some slides. So if people want to see that, Troy asked me to integrate it with the video for the website, but I was far too lazy to do that. So it is going to be on your LinkedIn profile.
Yes.
And you can get to that from your website, right?
Yes. I strongly recommend that people look at this PowerPoint presentation I put together, just because there's a really neat diagram that kind of outlines everything and makes everything easier to follow. If you look up my name on LinkedIn, Troy Golden, or just email me, go to my website.
What's your website?
Golden Group CRE. The last letters are CRE as in commercial real estate. So it's goldengroupcre.com. You'll find my email there. Email me, ask me, I'll send you the slides. The PowerPoint presentation will outline everything, and you can follow along as we go over the system in this interview.
And I'll have a link to Troy's website and his email on our show page too. It's easybusiness.com. So without further ado, why don't you kind of go through and let's dig in a little deeper on our last conversation.
Sure. Well, if you're following along in the PowerPoint presentations, you'll see the first slide is a diagram that will kind of outline everything we'll go over. And there's basically 4 major pillars to the system. First, this systematic approach involves building and then later continuously updating a prospect database. And this is kind of the foundation of the way I like to sell. And we'll go over the details of how I did this and how others can do this as well. But in order to create a database successfully, one needs to specialize. For me, as a commercial real estate broker, it meant actually canvassing the buildings and on the ground finding out who was actually in the properties. That might not apply to other businesses.
So when you say you need to specialize, that's because if you don't narrow down the database, you're just going to be overwhelmed with people who aren't applicable to what you do. So if I'm a general practitioner, which I am, I need to, even if I want to stay a general practitioner, I need to figure out which area I want to market to for the database. Something like new home buyers if I want to do, estate plans or something like that.
Precisely. And there's many ways to specialize. I'll just use my own industry for an example, but whoever's listening to this, they can apply these principles to whatever they do. As a commercial real estate broker, I can specialize by property type, by geography, by whether I'm representing the landlord or the tenant. As a lawyer, you could be, I think you do a little bit of everything, but you like to be the local.
Mm-hmm. Your community law firm.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you're kind of marketing to people, you probably don't go after a lot of people in other states.
Sure.
It's kind of the same thing, or there's basically 4 reasons to specialize. One, it strengthens your brand, and that's kind of what we've been getting at. And 2, it's just for practical reasons. You need to specialize in order to create a database, because it becomes overwhelming if you're not specialized. If you couldn't be an attorney that's a general practitioner for every state. in the U.S. or every country in the world. Otherwise, the database becomes meaningless.
Sure.
And just impossible to do. 3, it allows you to send targeted marketing pieces. You can collect information that's relevant to the people in your database and elicit a response. As a broker, for example, since I specialize in office users in the western suburbs, if I find out something relevant, like office rent rates are going up, and then I have a database of office tenants, they'll be interested in that. But if I had a database of, retail tenants, they might not be as interested. They may, but they're not going to be as interested.
Mm-hmm.
And then 4, this is kind of like number 2, but it just makes it a lot easier and more practical to collect market data.
Sure.
You kind of have to specialize, and I don't mean to rule out you can be a generalist, but then in what you do, but then you have to specialize in the area that you target.
Yeah, you have to pick a marketing campaign and go with it. When you do Google AdWords or something like that, for me, I don't just try to pick the word attorney. I'll pick, Downers Grove divorce attorney,
right,
and narrow it down because that's a smaller field to compete in, and it's less of a marketing budget to compete in that field.
Exactly. So, in this, I was talking before about, my experience as a campaign manager. This kind of gets back to what we're seeing, or what I saw as a political campaign manager. I mean, you see this on your TV screen today.
Donald Trump?
Donald Trump, exactly. Donald Trump has chosen his specialty as a guy who he'll say anything. And, he's the truth teller. No one's ever going to be to the right of Donald Trump. And then there are the establishment guys. And then, Bernie Sanders, he's always going to be to the left. No one's ever going to be to the left of Bernie Sanders. And Hillary Clinton is the moderate in the Democrat primary. So they choose their brand, and then they go after, or they pursue that identity. And then,
well, that's why Donald Trump can say, things like he doesn't want to allow Muslims to re-enter the United States and still keep his, 32% or wherever he's at, because that's his heart. That's his. He knows what his target market is, and he's trying to appeal to that target market.
Exactly. So once you've decided what your target is, you have to find people who meet that criteria. For me, that meant actually on the ground, or finding those people, visually walking through buildings, saying, okay, this tenant's here, they meet my criteria, and then going back to my office and doing internet research to confirm information. For other industries, it could mean other things. There could be other means. But I'll go over what I did, and then people can apply these lessons as they may or may not apply. As an office tenant rep broker, it makes sense for me to target prospects who are over a certain size, under a certain size, and locally based. So I basically watch through every major building in my market, create a list of every tenant that was worth going after, but not so big that they wouldn't go with me because they were international companies or national companies. And then I did internet research to confirm who the contact was and what the contact information was. As a attorney or someone in another industry, there could be certain lists you could buy or other means of finding this information. But in general, there's a certain principle that applies. The more scarce a piece of information, the more valuable.
Yeah, because if there's a list out there, everybody's got the list and everyone's cold calling that list.
Exactly. I kind of did things the hard way because I was just willing to invest the time. There's a couple. I mean, you can either invest time or money in building your database. And I borrowed a bunch of money and then invested about a year in building up my database. But you can either buy information and then slowly build off of it, or you can hire someone that you trust and then have them build it for you, or you can buy a list. But in general, there's a balance between scarcity of information and value, and everyone has to make their own decisions.
It seems like someone who, you talk about buying versus investing time, it seems like a project that if you're not just starting out, if you actually have some capital to invest in it, even if you want to create your database from scratch, you could hire, an intern or something.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not rocket science what you're doing. It just takes a little bit of investigation and a systematic approach, right?
Yes, absolutely. I just recommend that if you hire someone, an intern, I made a mistake in that, or make sure you hire someone who you trust, or don't hire a virtual assistant who's not, or don't, two mistakes to avoid. Don't hire someone who can sell the information to someone else, and don't hire someone who you can't at least check their work a little.
Sure.
Because it's easy to not, if they're not invested in the work, I mean, it's easy to fake it.
Yeah.
It's easy to fake it. So it's just a balancing act.
And to some degree, you could get around the selling the information thing with an agreement, a contract that would put some heavy damages on them if they sell you call it a trade secret, but no one wants to litigate.
Right.
Chances are, if they did that, you probably wouldn't want to pursue them over it, but that's one way to cover your butt on it.
Yeah. So, next step is internet research. Well, basically finding out who the contact is and what the contact information is. You may outsource this, but I just want to add a few pointers for finding email addresses, whether you outsource it or not. Most people probably already know this who are listening, but there's a page on my slide on how to find email addresses that's helpful to go over. I do this a lot. Obviously, there's the website, but also a Google search for connecting on LinkedIn. Every first degree connection you have on LinkedIn. Often, if someone has their default setting, then you have their email address, which a lot of people don't realize. And then if you can find someone's else's email at their company, same company, most companies tend to have a pattern in terms of emails, so you can apply that pattern and then just deduce someone's email address. It can be a little bit of monotonous going through emails, but if you get an email of a decision maker at a large company, it can be worth the time invested, especially for relationship sales where the commissions are large. So getting the email of the CEO at medium to large company, it's worth investing the time. And then data.com, the information there is pretty accurate. So I'd recommend that site.
So what is data.com?
It's a website where you trade an email to get an email.
Okay.
Again, this is something that you can outsource, but if you're doing it, I'd recommend using these tools or for your interns. You can and once you have 5 emails, you can trade them for 5 new emails and take those emails
within the same sort of database.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's kind of it's a tool online where if you enter in a piece of information, you'll get a point, and then you can spend those points to take out information.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So what's next?
what's next? Next is now you have your database. Now it's time to basically set up a system where you're continuously cold marketing uh, or marketing to the database, even if you don't have a specific reason to. You set up a system to continuously touch them, uh, usually through multiple media, mail, email, and phone calls. Um, this accomplishes two things. One, it just reminds them that you're out there. It establishes name recognition. Two, it allows you to update your database. So if I send an email to, let's say I have you as the head of the firm, and your email might bounce back, or you might reply and say, I'm on vacation, I'll get back to you in a week. But that email signature might have your cell phone. Then I can add your cell phone to my database. And then in a week, I could call you on your cell phone. I might be more likely to get you to pick up. And so my database has just improved a bit. Or I could send a letter to someone else, and the letter might be returned. And then I might deduce that they've moved, and then I would go to their website and have that information confirmed, and I figured out that they're at a new mailing address. So just by contacting people, continuously through email, mail, and phone, you can constantly have the information updated. You might have email bounce back, or you might have a receptionist pick up and say, that person doesn't work here anymore. And you can ask for the new person who's taken their place. So it's just important to, even if you don't have a reason to call, to continuously have a system to contact them. I usually try to email 4 to 6 times a year, send 2 mails each year, and 2 phone calls each year. Just even if I always try to add value every time I do this, but that's just automatic. And then the goal is to accumulate. If you're looking on the slide, this is the system. I'm referring to the diagram on the second page. Eventually, you want to accumulate leads so that you know when you're supposed to call. So let's say I call you, and you say, well, don't bother me now, because my lease doesn't expire for 2 years. Then I would put a note in my database saying, lease expires in 2 years, call in 1 year. So then I'd have an active account that pops up on my screen in 1 year telling me when to call. And then over the course of, and this would happen constantly because I'm constantly sending out these cold notices, and people are responding saying, usually with no, but no's not now because of this. And then I take those no's and then turn them into hot leads. And then with enough hot leads, those lead to active accounts. I would call you in a year and say, I think your lease is expiring because you told me. Mm-hmm. And by that time, you would have received, 2 to 3 more mail pieces, hopefully each one adding value of some kind, or 6 more emails, a couple of phone calls. So you know who I am, and you actually have a reason to use me. And then the rest, hopefully you'll take the call and a meeting.
So your email and mail pieces, are those, a mass email, like a newsletter and a Christmas card, or are they actual personally directed emails that you're going to send to individuals, a couple a day, through your database?
Both. Yeah. I'm glad you asked. I like to do something that I call mass personalization. where I send out, in terms of mail and email, I send out everything to my entire database, but in a way that it looks personalized. So you use what does that mean? It is possible to do this. And if you look at my slides, you'll see an example of you'll see a bad example and a good example. A bad example has the following traits. First name isn't used. For a mail piece, it's not handwritten. There's no signature. No value is added for email or mail, so that means that it might be like on Thanksgiving. Did you get those pieces that say like Happy Thanksgiving?
Sure.
Bye.
Yeah, you get it from a bunch of different businesses.
Right, and there's nothing wrong with that, but like for a bad email, it might have a lot of HTML pictures that are always blocked by your spam blocker, a lot of links, no real reason why they're sending it to you, and it might not even be to you. So that's like a bad piece. A good piece.
Before you move on, your example of bad email marketing says, "Hello, friend. Happy Flag Day. I am writing to offer you no value. Please enjoy the HTML picture above, which failed to download." It's
you know what I'm talking about,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. I'm glad I didn't get your Flag Day email.
And then at the bottom it says, if you have read this entire email, you are pliable enough to agree to a meeting over email. When can I come over to your office? Sincerely, unsuccessful salesman. And then I have pointless link number 1, pointless link number 2.com. I get these all the time, and the subject is vague email subject. Again, these are my slides. I think you'll like them. So a good email marketing is one that I sent out earlier. It's usually centered around, or there's a couple different ways to send out value add. It's harder to do. That's why people don't do them. But you can have an event that you're inviting people to. I know you do that a lot. Or you can send a market update, or let's see, I have a slide for this, for value add content, for some ideas.
And while you're finding that slide, I know I harp on this on a lot of podcasts, but I love my event newsletter that doesn't. I'm not sending out any BS. You know, I'll have the latest Seize Your Business episodes or my latest blog, but it's really about inviting people to the next event. People get upset if they're not on that list because they're missing out on the value that I'm adding by, letting them. And part of that is throwing good events. Me and you have thrown a lot of events together, and we try to weed out the bad ones that people aren't excited about and get heavy on the good ones.
Yeah. Events are great because people will respond to your emails, or at least not ask to be removed from the emails. So number 1 is invitation to events. Number 2 is some sort of industry or market update. As long as you don't overdo it, people will usually accept that. It's harder, but I know someone, I'm not sure if you're on his list, but Bruce Anderson sends a really good letter.
Yeah, we've interviewed him for the podcast before.
I mean, his are really long, but they're really good.
They're not generic market updates. They're actually adding some value.
I'll take time to read those. So, yeah, I don't know if email Bruce Anderson, ask for an example of his, because they're just remarkably good. And then you can also, this is kind of idiosyncratic to my industry, but sometimes I'll send people surveys asking them about their landlord or property for my own use, and people will take time to vent about their property or things they don't like about the landlord, or say good things, and that's helpful for me because I won't take clients to properties I know tenants don't like, and it's another way to contact prospects. So those are some ideas. Anyway, an example in my slides of a good piece is something I send, or we both co-sponsored an event in the summer or spring or summer or fall with Congressman Roscoe, and I sent out a couple emails just inviting people to that event, and then at the end I said, P.S. I recently started my own company. Note my new contact information and let me know if my services can be of use to you.
Well, and kind of in connection with that event, the brilliant thing that you've started doing is Troy will say, "I'm throwing this event. You know, here's what I'll trade you. I'll stick your logo as a sponsor of the event without making you pay any money if you get it out in your marketing channel." So, and I'm happy to do that because I get one more event to put out on my website, one more excuse to email my list. That's a good excuse, and I don't have to do any of the work in setting up the event. Troy wins because he gets his event out to a whole new database full of people. So if you have good partners that have good email lists to work with, we just started doing that recently, and that's been I don't know why we didn't do it 4 years ago.
I don't know. That's been a real win-win.
Yeah.
So just kind of summarizing what we've covered so far: build the database, step 1. Step 2, start a system of prospecting to the database through multiple media, email, mail, and phone. And then acquire information. In my industry, I like to acquire who the decision maker is, what the decision date is, what their needs and problems are. Continuously update your database, and create open tasks to contact them when appropriate, in addition to the cold marketing systems you've created. If someone says, yes, I'm the decision maker, contact me in 2 years when my lease expires, you have an open task to do that. And then you gradually create a large funnel of open tasks. That's basically the system.
Now, I'm not sure how far you have to go left in your presentation. Would this be a good breaking point to cover the rest in the next episode we do together, or do you have a couple more minutes that you just want to wrap everything up?
I can probably wrap everything up. I just have, I think, a final couple of pointers.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, I don't mind taking some more time on this because it's really good information.
For mail, I just want to say I've gotten a good I kind of already harped on this, but I've gotten much better response by hiring a vendor who will. I talked about mass customization.
Mm-hmm.
What I like to do for mail pieces is similar to email. I like to do you do a mail merge out of your prospect database so that everyone has their first name, their address inserted into the piece. But with mail, you need to hire a vendor to not only do all the printing and folding and stuffing, but also hire a vendor that will handwrite the address, put a first class and stamp on the outside, and then sign the piece for you. So it looks like it was just addressed to them.
I don't know much about stamps. What's the deal with the first class stamp? I don't even know what the difference between a first class and second stamp is.
Like the type of stamp that costs 49 cents, and not the type of stamp that's the type of stamp that you peel off.
Not the type that's ink printed onto the.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if you were going to write or mail one letter to one person,
mm-hmm.
and that that's what the letter would look like.
Yeah, because you want it to look when it shows up like personal correspondence that
Exactly.
someone actually took the time to send to you, and then you'll open it, not mass email or not mass mail.
Yeah.
So.
There's ways to have 2,000 letters look like a single letter written by you.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to pay for it, but it's worth the cost. So that's there's I'm happy to recommend the vendor I use.
Yeah, go ahead, because I'm curious about that too.
It's actually, I'm blanking on the name, so email me, but I think it's letterprinter.com or letterfriendly.com. But I have uh, send me an email, troy@goldengroupcre.com, and I'll respond with the vendor. But it's expensive. It tends to be like $1.50 per envelope with postage. But it's worth it because the open rate is so much more.
Now, is that $1.50 for the whole mailing, or is that just to do the envelope with the?
I believe so, or it might be $1.80.
Okay.
But that's with everything.
Okay.
Now, something I also like to do, but this might just be for me, is when I'm just starting the kind of the year out part of my process. Like someone says, my year expires. My lease expires in a year. I've been sending them stuff for a long time, and they say don't contact me, or the decision date is a year out. I will often show up at their office with donuts and a sign and a flyer, kind of reminding them who I am. And there's a example of this on the slides, second to last page. It's a pun. It says, "Do not forget your office lease expires soon." There's 3 bullet points at the bottom, kind of reminding them who I am and why they should use me. And I find that it's helpful to get them to take my calls.
Yeah, so pun-based marketing is what you'd recommend.
I recommend pun-based 2 things: pun-based marketing and sometimes just showing up. Like.
I'll do the showing up part. I might not follow you down the pun road, but
sometimes I guess what I'm saying is there's a role for selective canvassing.
Okay.
Like by canvassing, I mean door-to-door sales.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and if they're a warm lead that you're trying to turn into a hot lead and get your face in front of them, nobody hates getting donuts. And actually, I'm making fun of you for your pun, but it's actually a pretty clever way to connect the donuts to what you're trying to get them to do.
Right. My wife came up with that one, but I like it.
Well, then I wouldn't have made fun of it if I did it.
No, I'm giving her credit. She actually has come up with most of my better ideas in terms of the events. So I'll give her props to that one. And then we haven't really spoken about connecting over the phone. I don't really have a lot to say about that because for me that's more of, I don't have any real tricks. It's just a grind that I kind of have to do. It's more, you make the calls, you get the information, and then you record it. Sometimes people will ask me if I have any advice or tricks I use, and I don't use any tricks. It's just a matter of, except record everything you hear, put in your database, update the database, and I guess for me the main point of making calls is, well, I guess there's a couple points. One, telling people or showing people that you're not going away.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people that have yelled at me the first time, told me mildly to go away the second time. The third time told me when their lease expires. You're kind of just like wearing people down, and then I'm in this business for 30 years, and you're just showing them by calling them over and over again that you're just not going away. Not in an annoying way, because you're only calling twice a year, but just in the same way that an attorney buys an office space as a signal of strength, I guess. The calls, if you're a salesman, just showing up and showing your presence over a prolonged period of time is kind of the same thing, I guess.
And you know what? If they're not ready to talk to you, then I always do the ask. Is it all right if I follow up with you in 6 months? And they know then that they're not going to be bothered for another 6 months. And they usually give you the yes on that, and then you can say, yeah, you asked me to follow up with you, and you're not annoying them too much.
Yeah. So you have to strike that balance. I try not to annoy people, but you have to show people that you're not fly-by-night guy
Sure.
either. So this isn't the first time. When I call someone when their lease expires, I don't want to be the first call I've made. I want it to be,
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. You've already warmed up the lead over time, and they've already got a relationship with you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you want to share?
I think that basically covers it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
How can people reach you?
My phone number is 630-805-2463. I'm on LinkedIn, Troy Golden. Email address is Troy, Troy, at Golden Group CRE.com.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Troy. I'm sure we'll have you back very, very soon because it's always exciting. And like I said, the first episode we did together, the most listened to episode, and this one you even dug deeper. So I think this is even better. So I hope people enjoyed it, and thanks so much for taking the time to do it with me.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Take it easy.
Hey, you too.